Welcome to a pivotal moment in the world of broadcast as we proudly present the Men's Mental Health Show featuring the renowned Larry Mabry in collaboration with the Maassen Group. This essential exploration of men's mental health wouldn't be possible without the invaluable support of Rainier Avenue Radio World. Now, let's dive into this crucial conversation with Larry Mabry and the Maassen Group. Your mental well-being matters. Here's Larry Mabry.
On that day, I ended up moving here to Washington, and the rest is history. So, just wanted to kind of share that. So, anyway, long story short, in Washington. Very real. But ironically, I met a lot of cool people here that were very paramount with kind of helping me kind of get situated here in Seattle. And for those individuals who are kind of suffering, I kind of see you, and I wanted to kind of make sure that we had something out here to kind of support those individuals who needed that support. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about mental health. So, uh, a lot of times in our community, I would say, uh, as men, it's a little bit of a challenge to feel comfortable expressing uh, based on numbers, uh, based on upbringing, uh, based on feeling inadequacy, lack of confidence, or things of that nature. And, and I, Firstly, I wanted to share that for those individuals that are seeking or desire to receive support, there's an organization that will support, and it's called South King Emotional Wellness League. And we call it school, and they will give you like a scholarship program to support. And this is for all people, Black and brown people that need support, but just anybody in general. But my particular drive is more towards men's mental health, and that organization has been profound to support a lot of individuals that need support. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me for that information. So today on this show, we're going to cover 100 mental health challenges that many men face. Okay, so mental health challenges can affect individuals of all genders, actually, but it's important to recognize that both men and women can face similar difficulties. However, societal and cultural factors can lead to unique challenges for men when it comes down to mental health. And so today we're going to discover 100 challenges that men may face as it relates to mental health. Okay, the first challenge that men may face is societal pressure to conform to traditional masculinity ideals. Secondly, stigma around seeking help for mental health issues. I notice in my practice, a lot of times, when I would talk to young men, I would just say, hey, we're just two brothers having a conversation, right? Just like you would talk to an older brother or mentor. And I notice within the mental health space, sometimes it's just a challenge to have individuals that look like you that can assist you on some things that you want to kind of work through. Okay, number 3, difficulty expressing emotions due to social expectations. Sometimes that could be a tough one, right? Because society kind of has a certain expectation that we should do things a certain way. We have emotions, we have things that we're going through, and we want to make sure that we're supported with that. High expectations to be the primary breadwinner. That's a big one. I grew up with a 2-parent family household. Both my parents worked. However, had a stepdad situation. So, but he worked, and my mom worked as well. But I do have friends that sometimes that's a challenge, right? To kind of make sure that you bring enough money to make sure everyone's okay. And there's a lot of pressure with that. Balancing work and family. That's a tough one. Isolation and loneliness. I grew up in a house where it was not very, I would say, the emotions weren't something that that was celebrated from a man's perspective. I would say my mother, had my back, dad had my back, things of that nature, friends and that, but it wasn't something that was really celebrated. So our goal is to assist men to feel comfortable with expressing themselves. And it's at the end of the day, as we handle our emotions, we normally just feel better. Okay. Relationship conflicts and communication problems. That's a big one. Men and women have different communication styles. So it's important to kind of know how to do that in a healthy manner. Struggles with self-esteem and body image, performance anxiety in various aspects of life, and coping with loss and grief. And I would say for me, that was a tough one. I know for me, when I lost my grandmother many, many years ago, everyone else was kind of dealing with their thing. Excuse me. And you basically have to kind of work through that and be okay to talk to somebody that allows you to be vulnerable, supports you with that vulnerability, but at the same time, feeling comfortable enough to express that. Okay. Substance abuse and addiction issues, fear of vulnerability and perceived weaknesses. Another one is childhood trauma and its impact on adult mental health. For me, I noticed that as I was in relationships, I noticed a certain pattern. And I realized that, okay, at the end of the day, I could decide to change that pattern, or I can decide to perpetuate that pattern. And for me, I realized that the only way to do that was to handle some of the emotional baggage that I struggle with. I'm going to kind of digress for a little bit and kind of come back. Within the community I grew up in, a lot of individuals struggle with anger. And in my practice, we talk about the anger iceberg. And I'll kind of explain that in a little bit. If you notice the iceberg, it basically has the top of it that people see. And then there's the line where the water kind of meets. And underneath that is basically the girth of the iceberg, if you will. And how I like to look at it is fear, emotional trauma, trials and tribulations, frustrations, all those things we basically put down. And when we don't handle those things, they typically pop out in various situations. So you may get triggered with a coworker, right? Or you may be in a situation where you're in Seattle traffic and someone cuts in front of you and you're feeling frustrated, or you're running late for work, and you got to feed your family, and it's the third time you did it, and it's like a lot of things build up, and basically we just kind of put those things down, but they express themselves in other ways. And our goal is to work through those emotional challenges and do it in a safe way, safe manner, so that we can honor who we are, honor ourselves, but at the same time, not get attached to it, right? And so how do we do that? A lot of times people ask me that. Well, first thing we want to do is we want to acknowledge, okay, I'm upset, right? And there's a couple strategies that we could do to handle that. One thing I noticed for me that's been very effective when I'm really angry is separate yourself from that situation as quickly as possible, right? Take a deep breath. A lot of times when you take a deep breath, it puts you in the present moment, allows you to relax, allows you to not get attached to that situation. When you separate yourself from that situation, you have a lot of thoughts kind of going around. You're in what they call fight or flight, which basically puts you in the survival mode, and you don't really have enough, I would say, mental energy to basically think and process, because in that situation, when you're in fight or flight, you basically want to protect yourself, from harm. And so if you take a deep breath, it kind of puts you in a constant now moment. And that way you can kind of alleviate that situation, right? But you still have to kind of work through that. And then what I recommend in that situation too is to kind of get away from that situation, take a deep breath, breathe, kind of process it, kind of figure out, okay, what could I have done better in the situation, right? And then sometimes you might need to come back a little bit later once you cool down, right? But as you practice this more and more and more, you realize that, you'll be in charge of your anger and you won't project it on other people. Okay. All right, let's get back to our list. Okay. So limited emotional support networks. And that's powerful, because if you grew up in a family where you just heard yelling, you think that's the norm, right? And so with the Maassen Group and our life coaching, basically, we kind of help people work through that. Also, post-traumatic stress disorder. How many people we have here who are in the military? My father was in the military, and there's a lot of stress that people go through, or occupations. Certain jobs that you do could be very stressful. In Detroit, when I was in the education field, there's a lot of stressful situations that you had to be mindful of. Work-related stress and burnout, and that could be any position, right? Economic stress and job insecurity. If you're in a situation where, you don't really know if your job is going to be there tomorrow, or you're working with someone where you're not feeling respected, or you're not feeling like they're acknowledging you, and they're stressed with that, or communication or lack thereof communication, that could be an issue. Also, mental health disparities in underserved communities. We see that a lot. Difficulty in identifying and acknowledging mental health symptoms. I would say that's a big problem in our community. Peer pressure and negative influences. I grew up, like I said, in Detroit, where a lot of times people would play the dozens. And for those people that don't know, we would do the my mama jokes, things of that nature. Hey, how you doing? We would do different things to kind of, joke with people and our friends and things of that nature. And sometimes we would feel some kind of way, but based on the peer pressure, we wouldn't really express it, even though we was feeling it, because we might feel a little nervous or a little embarrassed. But But where do those feelings go? Well, they basically get pushed down. So we want to make sure that we honor those things, and communicate in a way where we're feeling like we're supported. Okay. All right, let's get back to the list. Societal anxiety and discomfort in social situations. That's a big one. I noticed when I came here, like I said, from Michigan, there's a huge difference between the East Coast and the West Coast. And for those people out here who know, you know. The biggest thing is I'm a tennis player, and I noticed that when I would go out to a tennis court in Michigan, you just roll out, got your tennis, tire on, you go out. Hey, what's up? You want to hit a few balls? Yeah, no problem. I would say it's different now, but 3 years ago, and I don't know, maybe it was because of the pandemic. That might be it. But I would go out here in Washington, hey, let's play. And people just kind of look at you. I'm like, well, what's up? So I had to kind of learn that, it's just a different vibe, and just kind of know how to work with that. Okay. Fear of being judged or ridiculed, right? And that's a tough one, because a lot of times, it's okay to have a different thought that someone else has, but it's important for you to not kind of take it personal, right? But if there's an issue with communication, sometimes that could be a challenge. All right. Okay. Lack of awareness about available mental health resources. And I wanted to address that again. Like I said before, we have services to support individuals with mental health, as well as school, which is the South King Emotional Wellness League here in Washington, where they give support for individuals that need assistance with mental health. The next one, perfectionism and the need to meet high standards. How many people fall in that? And a lot of times that may come from what you see in family, right? If your mom's a perfectionist, she instills that in you. There you go. Or dad, or just other family members. Struggles with anger management. A lot of clients I deal with struggle with that. I do deal with clients who are either in the penal system or just struggling with anger management when their own lives. So we can support you with that. Also, fear of expressing vulnerability in friendships. So like I said earlier, as a man, sometimes that could be a challenge. You don't want to feel like, you're not cool, or you don't want to feel like, you're not strong or powerful. But it's okay. You just want to make sure you communicate it to someone who will respect you and honor you and support you through those vulnerability type of situations. Mental health issues associated with divorce and breakups. And that's a tough one, because typically when you have a divorce, I know in Michigan, if there's a divorce situation, typically, you split, the man gets a percentage, usually the woman gets half. And, social emotionally, that could be tough. Right. And then from a financial standpoint, and then who do you talk to, right, when your family has kind of been separated? And so it's important to support individual men in that situation. Pressure to be emotionally strong for others. That's a huge one. For me, I grew up with two sisters, my dad and my mother. So my real dad actually left when I was younger. And then my stepdad came on board when I was 5. He and I are pretty cool. We're tight to this day. I'm over 50. So, but that strength of like being strong for others could be tough, like, because it's like, who supports you when you need support, right? So it's important to make sure you have what I like to call your Jedi Council, people that you can talk to, people that can support you to help you when you're going through things, right? Emotionally. All right. Stress associated with being a new father. Yeah, because that's a whole new world, right? You have someone looking up to you for your guidance, and you may feel like, oh, wow, I'm still working on things I need to work on, right? And so how do you support in that situation? Okay. All right. Balancing work and personal life. That's something that you're constantly working through, right? Making sure you take time for yourself. Also, making sure that you tell people no. Sometimes you have to let people know, hey, I can't do that because you need to take time for yourself. So you got to put balance. Mental health effects of discrimination or racism. That's a big one. Um, and it's really interesting with that one. I want to kind of share a story with that. When I started in education many years ago in Detroit, it was very interesting because it's pretty diverse, but the schools that I was a part of were pretty much African American, and I had some situations where um, we would have conflicts with certain types of teachers or certain students and things of that nature, and it would be a challenge if, for example, you worked in a school district where the staff were predominantly one culture but the students were another culture. So sometimes that would kind of cause some conflict with that type of thing. And if other cultures weren't privy to the things that you were going through, sometimes you felt as though it would fall on deaf ears. That's not always the case, but sometimes if people weren't privy to those challenges, it could be a challenge to feel like you're being heard. Okay, feeling unheard or dismissed in therapy or group sessions or groups. And as I speak to a lot of my clients, a lot of times they're saying, hey, it'd be great to just have people that look like me. Right. And this is not always a judgment, but it's just a situation where people like to be able to connect. And if you're around certain people when you don't really feel like you have a lot in common, that can make it a little frustrating. All right. Gender related violence and abuse. Concerns about aging and mortality. Concerns about sexual performance and relationships. Self-doubt and imposter syndrome. That's a tough one, right? Depression and anxiety related to unresolved childhood issues. And a lot of times people may end up in relationships not realizing that some of the bonds that they have could be traumatic, right? And as you heal those traumatic bonds, then basically the relationship will change. Okay. All right. Issues related to fatherhood and parenting. That could be a big one. Fear of being vulnerable in romantic relationships, right? Because as we get in relationships, sometimes there's expectations and there could bring anxiety with that, right? If you didn't see a healthy relationship. So how do you know how to create a healthy relationship? All right, let's move on. Coping with unemployment and financial struggles. Yeah, that could be a tough one because typically the male is revered as being the breadwinner or the person who brings home the bacon or the individual who has enough financial security to take care of himself and the family. Body dysmorphic disorder or muscle dysphoria, adjustment to life changes and transitions. And that could be on a couple levels. For example, let's say that you have children and they go to college, adjusting now because now you have the children are gone and you basically have empty house, empty nester. How do you handle that when you basically been raising your children and now they're in college or doing their own thing? You may feel a certain kind of way. It's important to, make sure you're connected with a community so that they have you. And speaking of that, I want to kind of talk about that because again, I want to thank, Rainier Avenue Radio, that world for their support, but also too, when I came here 3 years ago, there's a group of people that kind of took me under their wing and kind of supported me. And I appreciate that. So community is very, very important. Okay. Struggles with perfectionism and professional life. Yeah, that could be a tough one. That could be a really tough one. Loneliness due to changing social circles. Yes. I would say that just being authentic, that was a tough one for me coming here because I had a very established career in Michigan and chose to come here. And it was like starting all over. And it's been great. But I would say the lesson I learned behind that for myself is I would say I got stronger emotionally through that. However, you know, there are a lot of people who kind of feel lonely with that because the social circles do change, but that just basically means that you're growing. Okay. All right. Issues related to sexual orientation and coming out, fear of emotional intimacy and friendships, impact of trauma and violence in the community. And that was a big one in Detroit because there's a lot of gang related crime. Uh, there's a lot of what I noticed in the classroom setting was it was very difficult for a lot of students to prioritize education because of a lot of challenges they had in the community, which kind of led me down this life coaching path because I noticed that uh, as we worked on our social emotional skills and became more understanding of each other, coming more from our heart, then I noticed that within the classroom, it built a community and people wanted to work together and therefore they wanted to excel as long as they saw each other as one. And so for me, I had a lot of extensive training with conflict resolution, getting people to kind of work together and social emotional type trauma to make sure that we build a community first. And then therefore we can actually get to the educational aspect. Okay, back to the list. Mental health challenges in the LGBTQ plus community. There's a lot of challenges in the community, and it's important that everyone realizes that there's support out here for you. At the end of the day, if we have a better community, end up having a better world. So it's important that we support one another because we've all been in those situations where we weren't our best. And so it's important that we support one another. All right, we'll move on in the list. Okay. Negative body image and eating disorders, coping with infertility and reproductive issues. And this could be, okay. All right. We're at our time right now, and we'll continue that next week. And so just to let you know, coming up next, we'll have Tracy Terrell with Better Together and Living Powerfully. So thanks a lot, guys, and I'll see you guys next week.